My name is Miss Yellow Shoes, and today I'm going to walk you through how to sew the cat doll and the dog doll. If you're looking for the pattern, go ahead and check the description box. Grab your sewing supplies. Let's go. I like to use a flannel fabric for the body of my doll. I just think that it's really soft, and kids tend to snuggle them more when they're soft. You can also use cotton. That's perfectly fine. For the inner ear of the doll, I do use cotton. Typically, I like to pick a pattern that matches the color of the body of the doll, but also has a little bit of contrast. Florals are my personal favorite. Be very mindful when you are cutting out your pattern pieces. If it has a small star on the pattern piece and it says cut with a 1/2 inch of seam allowance, make sure you are doing that. So when I cut out this pink doll body, I made sure to cut with about a 1/2 inch of seam allowance around the edge of the pattern. So mostly for all of the body parts, like the arms, the legs, the ears, that type of thing, you are going to need to cut it out with a 1/2 inch of seam allowance. But when it comes to the face pieces, such as the little nose or the muzzle, you don't have to cut those out with a 1/2 inch of seam allowance. You can just cut those straight out. So today I'm going to be showing you how to make the dog and the cat. I just picked pink and blue. You can pick whatever colors you want to do. So excited. I'm going to sew these pretty much side by side because they are incredibly similar to one another except for some of the facial features. First thing we're going to do are the ears. So I'm going to take the right sides of my fabrics. I'm going to take the outer ear, which should be probably the same color as the body of your doll, and then the inside of the ear, which for me is this really pretty pink cotton. I'm going to lay them right sides together, and then I will pin those in place. Same thing for the dog ears. I have this really nice soft flannel. So the right side of the flannel will be facing up. The right side of the cotton inner ear will be facing down, and I will pin those together. As I said, for my cat ears, I have the right sides of the fabric facing each other, and I'm going to pin those together. I also have the dog ears here. Same thing, right sides together and pin. If you wanted to, it is also fun sometimes to give more of a patchy look to the stuffed animal. And you can do a different color ear for either ear. If you're making the dog or the cat and you want to give them a patch, you could make the ear the same color as the patch, or you could have just one patch and the opposite ear is the same color as the patch. There's a lot of fun that you can have with these dolls. These are very customizable. Okay, I have all of my ears pinned, so we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew them together. I have my machine set to a straight stitch, and I'm using like a 1.5 stitch length. When you sew the ear, make sure you leave an opening at the top to turn it right side out. And we are sewing with a 1/2 inch of seam allowance or so. She didn't come out super pretty because my machine was being a little bit funky, but that's what the dog ear looks like. I'm going to go ahead and do the cat ear. So here we have the cat ear. Here the cat ear is all sewn, and the dog ear. I'm going to actually cut off some of the excess thread. And I'm going to cut off excess thread on the cat ear as well. This will just help with turning. I am turning my ears right side out. And then I'm probably going to go and iron these just to make sure that they're all nice and flat for the rest of my sewing project. So here are the kitty cat ears. You can also mix and match these ears if you wanted to make a dog that has more triangle ears, like pointy ears that face up. You can actually use the cat ears for that. You can also tack the cat ears down like this if you wanted it to have a little bit of a fold after you put it onto the doll. You would hand stitch that after you've sewn the doll and you've stuffed it and all of that, and that can give your dog a completely different look. I just finished ironing down my ears. The cat ears are ready to go, so I'm just going to put those aside. If you are doing the hound dog ears, what I like to do is fold them in half and just kind of tack them down just a little bit. And now these dog ears are ready to go. I'm going to put them aside and we're going to go work on the face. All right, let's start with the cat first, since that one is the simpler between the two animals. At least it is if you're not putting on any extra patches or anything like that. We're going to take the muzzle and we're going to find the center of the face. I like mine to be about down here, like that. You can place it wherever you think it looks good, but that's where I like it. And I'm going to pin that in place. I like to use at least 2 pins because this can wiggle a little bit if you're not careful while you're sewing it on your sewing machine. I'm just going to use a straight stitch and go all the way around the edge of the muzzle to attach it to the doll. I like to go over just the first few stitches that I made just to make sure everything is nice and secure. Now, if you're going to embroider a nose, or you wanted to add a little tongue, or you were going to embroider some whiskers, now is the time to do that. I am going to go over and do the dog face before I come back and insert my safety eyes and my safety nose. But if you wanted to use fabric paint, or like I said, embroider, this is the time to do that. If you're going to be adding the little face patches onto the doll, if you're going to be adding the face patches onto the doll, whether that be the cat or the dog, whether you're doing 2 patches or maybe you're just going to do 1 patch, you are going to be following along for this step. So I'm going to place my patches on. You can see that they do not go completely to the edge. That is totally fine. And I'm going to pin those in place. Your patches can be the same color. They can be 2 different colors. This is where it can get very customizable. Okay, now I'm going to use my sewing machine and do a straight stitch all the way around one patch and then a straight stitch all the way around the other patch. So you see here, I just sewed on one of the eye patches. So as you can see here, I just sewed on one of the face patches. As you can see here, I just sewed on one of the face patches. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, and then we're going to put on the muzzle. I'm going to add the muzzle, find the center of the doll, and that's where this point is going to go. And I'm going to put mine about here. You can place it as high or as low as you want. I think it looks good about right here. So I'm going to pin it in place. And same thing with the cat doll. I like to use at least 2 pins because this can tend to wiggle a little bit underneath the sewing machine. And we're just going to do a straight stitch all the way around the edge of the muzzle. If you wanted to add a little tongue coming out of the mouth, what I would do would be to cut out a little like U shape out of some felt. And once I would get to this part, I would stick it underneath the muzzle and then I would sew over it. You can always hand stitch it on later, but if you wanted to have a little tongue sticking out, that's when I would do that. Just like I said for the kitty cat doll, if you are going to be embroidering a nose or you wanted to do whiskers, embroider some eyes, this is the time to do it. If you wanted to use fabric paint to paint on a little nose or paint some eyes, you could do them open, closed. You can give her eyelashes, whatever, eyebrows. Now is the time to do it. You do need to let fabric paint sit for a good 24 hours before you continue on. I am going to go get my safety eyes and my safety noses, and I'm going to install those into my dolls. This is how I decided to do my kitty cat and my puppy dog. Now we're going to install the ears. Puppy dog, we have the ears folded in half. We want the fold to be facing upward. And you can kind of decide where on the dog you want his ears to go. Like I did mention, if you wanted to do triangular ears and have the dog's ears pointing up, like if you're making a German Shepherd or something like that, you would place them on the dog like this. But we'll go over that when we do the cat doll. So I like to put mine about I like to put mine just a little bit higher than where my eyes are, but of course that's totally up to you. So I'm just going to pin mine right here, and I'll get the other ear and do the same thing. Line them up so that they are in the same spot. And pin it down. Do double check your ears because sometimes when you're pinning it, they can kind of shift and then you'll get a lopsided ear. So if you're making the dog, it should look something like this right now. Now let's work on the cat. I'm going to put my ears roughly here so that they are covering the eye. And I'm going to pin them in place. Make sure you're doing right sides together. The inner ear is facing downward. It should also look the same from the back, and that will let you know if you have your ears on correctly or if they're on lopsided. Take your time when you're doing this because it is kind of sad once you've finished your doll, you turn it right side out and start stuffing it and realize one of the ears is lopsided. I have done that in the past. Here's my cat doll. We're going to go and sew a straight stitch just on the top where the ears are connected to the body. For the dog, you're going to just sew right here. We're going to flip it over and sew right here where the ears are touching the body. And then we get to start putting the body together. We're going to take my pins out and check it. If you pop your ears up and think that they're not quite where they need to be, you can seam rip it and reattach and try again. Let's do the puppy dog. Sometimes when you're sewing and you've put safety eyes in, it can get a little bit bumpy and hard to maneuver. So you can flip it over so that the pointy part of the safety eyes are facing up, and that will make it a little bit easier for sewing. Same thing with the dog. I'm going to take my pins out and take a look. This dog ear is just a little bit, I'm going to tack this dog ear down just a little bit more. There we go. I like that. So here's the dog. And here's the cat. Okay, we're going to make sure that our ears are tucked in really nicely. And we're going to take the right side of our fabric and put it on top. So right sides facing each other. I like to pin them together with the safety eyes and safety nose pointing up because it can get a little bit bumpy and it can be a little bit tricky to pin it correctly. So if you did use safety eyes and safety noses like I did, go ahead and pin the body pieces together with those facing up. This is what the cat doll looks like, all pinned together. This is what the dog looks like, all pinned together. Again, I do recommend that when you're sewing this, you're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and that you are sewing it with the safety eyes facing up. It makes it a whole lot easier and a whole lot less bumpy when you're sewing this together. It's also helpful to do a quick little back stitch at this point because when you turn it right side out, you don't want to be undoing the stitches that you just made. One thing that might be helpful for you in turning this thing right side out is to either create little snippets like this around the corners, and that will help you turn it right side out and be less bulky, or you can go ahead and cut off any of the excess fabric, and that will help you turn things right side out. It will make things a little bit less bulky. Cut all my strings. I've already turned my puppy dog right side out. Now let's work on the kitty cat. If you get stuck, you can grab the little ears and that can help you pull things right side out too. Oh, it's so cute. So cute. Now that I've showed you how to make the cat and the dog, I'm actually going to send you over to a previous video that I already made explaining how to do the arms, how to do the legs, and how to attach everything to the body. I already made this tutorial, so I think I'm just going to save myself some time and show you that set of videos instead of rehashing everything. But stay tuned because when we come back, I will show you the finished product and how to fix these ears from sticking straight out. I'm going to put her aside and I'm going to sew the limbs. I'm going to put the limbs right sides together and pin. Right now I'm working on the legs and then pin. I like to use just one pin, but if you need to use more, that is perfectly fine. I have 2 arms, right sides together, pinned together, and 2 legs. I'm going to sew them with a straight stitch with a 1/2 inch of seam allowance while sewing. I will be cutting off excess fabric to help reduce bulkiness and to help ease the turning of the piece. If you're concerned about this doll holding up properly to extreme play, I recommend also doing a zigzag stitch around the edge just to help everything be super, super durable. Okay, I have all 4 of my limbs. I'm going to turn them right side out. You might want to use a chopstick or a pencil to help you do this. Now I'm going to show you how to attach the legs to the body. I'm going to take the body and take the raw edge and turn it in on itself, maybe about a 1/2 inch or so, something like that. You can put a pin in here if that's helpful for you. I'm going to take one of the legs. I'm going to put it inside of the cow body, also about a ½ inch or so. I like to try and line up my seams on the leg with the seam on the side of the body. This will take a little bit of finagling, but I promise the further we get into it, the easier it will get. Now I'm going to take my needle and thread, and I'm going to start stitching. I like to try and hide the knot inside of the doll. So if I need to, I will try and poke the knot down inside of there. Now I'm just going to use a simple straight stitch to go all the way across the doll's body. Okay, and now that leg is tacked in place. I don't have to worry about holding that anymore. I'm going to sew a little bit along the bottom of the doll before attaching the other leg. Now I'm starting to get about halfway through, and I think it's about time to stick the other leg in. I'm going to try and finagle it a little bit to make sure that both legs are the same length. I don't want one leg poking out more than the other. I like to try and line up the seams on the side. It's not necessary. That's just how I like to do it. And I'm going to continue sewing across. All right, I have sewn all the way across one time just using a basic straight stitch or running stitch. Now I'm going to go back across the other way, making sure that my stitches going in between all of those gaps. Insert my needle so that my stitch meets where that last one ends. There shouldn't be any gaps in the stitching because when you're going back through the other way, you're filling in all of those gaps so that there is a streamline of running stitches or straight stitches all the way across the bottom of the doll. So do you see here how the stitches go all the way across the bottom and there are no gaps? If you are unsure if your stitches are tight enough, you can also go back and forth several times just to make sure everything is super, super secure. I am going to go ahead and make a knot. I like to make at least 2 knots just to be sure everything stays where I want it. Then I like to hide my excess thread by poking into the doll and then cutting off the thread like that. And now we're going to work on the arms. They have been stuffed. I'm going to turn the raw edge inside on itself about a ½ inch or so. It's a really good idea to fold down the raw edge of both arms at the same time so you can lay them next to each other and make sure that one arm is not longer than the other. Now, there are a couple different ways that you could close up the arm. I like to do a whip stitch because I like seeing the stitches. It gives like the hallmark and the whimsy of having a handmade doll. It's also very secure. That's what I prefer. You could also go through and just do a straight stitch if you're comfortable with that. That's what we did at the bottom of the doll right here. You could do an invisible stitch if you don't want to see any stitch marks. I prefer to do a whip stitch that I'm going to show you right now. I have the arm so that both seams are on the side. And I'm just going to hide my knot on the inside of the doll. And I like to just do a small whip stitch all the way across the top of the arm. Now at this point, I like to add a button. So I'm going to put my needle in and poke it out about right here. And I like to use these small wooden buttons. You can use whatever you like. They're just like buttons you would use on a dress shirt or something like that. These are the ones that I like to use. So I'm actually going to put the button on right now. And I'm not trying to super securely attach my button. I'm just putting enough stitches just to hold it in place. I'm going to make a knot at the back of the arm, do another knot for extra security, and cut off the excess. And we're going to do that to the other arm as well. Now, this is where you are going to want a doll making needle. This needle is pretty long. I'd say maybe 5 inches, maybe 4.5 inches or so. You can do this next step with a regular needle. It's just going to take a lot more squishing to get the needle all the way across. I have both of the arms done and ready. On the back of one arm, I'm going to poke through. I'm going to go through the button back to the back of the arm. Okay. And now I'm going to figure out exactly where I want my arms to go on the doll. I want them to go about right here. So first I'm just going to do a little stitch just to get that arm in the right spot. Now I'm going to go back into the arm. Every time I go through the arm, I want to make sure I am going through the button. That is what is going to help make this attachment very, very secure because you're going through the button each time. Okay, now I'm going to do that again. Pull it nice and tight. I just went through the arm. Now I'm going to go into the doll's body. Just make a small, small, small stitch. Pull it nice and tight. Going back into the doll's arm through the button. Back into the button. And now I'm going to go all the way across to the other side of the doll. This is why having a doll making needle is very, very helpful. I'm going to go through the back of the other arm, through the button, back through the button to the back of the arm, and pull to get that arm in place where I want it. Now I'm going to go through the doll's shoulder like this. I loosened up my arm a little bit so you could see what I was doing. Pull it nice and tight. Go back through the arm to the button. Go through the button. Back in through the button. And now I'm going to start going all the way across again to the other side of the doll. Once I've poked through the body on the other side of the doll, I'm going into the arm, back through the button, back into the button. And I'm being very careful and mindful where my needle is poking out. I kind of want it to stay in the same general area just so you don't really see those stitches. And I'm going to go all the way through the doll again to the other side. Through the arm, poke through the buttonhole, back in through the buttonhole, into the arm, into the body, all the way back across to the other side, and repeat. So I will do this over and over and over again until I feel like my arms are very, very secure. And then I'm going to show you how I tie off. I also like to do this with at least a couple strands of thread. So I'm done with this one. And this arm feels pretty secure. So what I'm going to do actually is wrap the arm with some of the excess thread. This just kind of helps give it a little bit of a cleaner look, and it helps kind of protect those stitches. And now I'm going to make a knot. I'm going to make another knot. And then I'm going to do the same thing where I poke through the doll just to kind of hide that excess thread. Now I'm going to get myself a little bit more thread on the needle, go back through a couple more times just to make sure everything's very, very secure. And then when I tie off, I've already wrapped this thread right here. I'm going to tie off on this side where I wrap the inner arm a little bit with the thread and then tie it off. These are very customizable. You can change the color, you can change the features. If you want to know how to get the puppy dog ears to lay a little bit flatter, all you have to do is just to take an iron and gently iron it right over here, or you could also pin them to the head of the dog and kind of spray it with a little bit of water, let it dry, and they'll be nice and floppy. I will be releasing the pants pattern soon, so be sure to check the description box for that, but you can find the skirt pattern right away in the description box. Thank you so much for sewing with me, and I'll see you next time.